Rest pauses. What are they? How do you do them properly? And why should you be doing them in the gym to save time and getting superior gains? Let's find out. So what is a rest pause? Well, in essence, a rest pause is when you take a mechanical set to failure, you rest anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds, and then bang out a few more reps beyond failure. And you might do this 1 to 4 times depending on the exercise. And on the surface, that's about it. That's all there is to rest pauses. But not really. There's a few nuances that you want to take into consideration before you start doing rest pauses willy-nilly. There are certain exercises that rest pauses are less favorable on, and certain movements where they are actually a key component. So how do we do them properly? How do we implement them correctly? Well, you have to analyze the exercise, numero uno. So if you have, say, a movement like a deadlift where you typically do 1 to 5 reps, this is a heavy compound movement. You need more time to rest in between sets in order to recover. And on top of that, you're doing less reps. So if you do a heavy set of deadlifts to failure, 5 rep max, you rest 10-15 seconds and try to get another few more reps, you're not going to get a single rep. So on heavy compound movements like deadlifts or squats, rest pauses aren't necessarily the greatest idea. Now, this isn't to say that you can't do rest pauses on a deadlift or squat. If you're doing, say, a set of 20 squats, you could potentially do a rest pause. Although if you're doing a set of 20 squats to failure, I really don't see you doing a rest pause beyond that. If you could truly take a set of heavy squats to failure with 20 reps, I mean, yeah, I guess you could do a rest pause after that if you wanted to, but I mean, I think that would probably suffice. Not to mention that deadlifts and squats already shouldn't necessarily be taken to failure, especially squats. As I've mentioned previously, you don't want to take squats to failure because now if you're stuck at the bottom with a bar on your back, you can't get back up, and that's not necessarily safe. Unless you're doing, say, a box squat with high pins or high safety pins. That way you can just dump the weight. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you have movements like side lateral raises or bicep curls where they're isolation and you typically do higher reps on them. So if you're doing, say, 10 to 15 reps on a side lateral raise, you could rest 10 seconds and immediately bang out another 8 reps because it's such a small muscle, the recovery rate is so much quicker. So in the case of smaller isolation movements where you're doing higher reps, rest pauses are perfect. And then you have somewhere in the middle, like pull-ups or maybe rows, where they're not necessarily super heavy compound movements, but they are compound and they are relatively heavy, and you might be doing them more of a 8 to 12 or 6 to 10 variant where it comes to rep range. In this case, you can still do rest pauses, but you're going to probably need more like 20 seconds, and you're probably only going to get 3 or 4 reps. So the time that you rest between rest pauses is going to be impacted depending on the movement. If it's a light side lateral raise, you might only need 5-10 seconds. There are also deceptive movements like dumbbell presses that do not go well with rest pauses. As with dumbbell presses, the first rep is notoriously harder than the second, third, maybe even 6th rep because you have no muscular elasticity, you have no movement to then bang off that muscular sort of coil or spring. You now have this dead stop weight that you have to press off your chest. If you just banged out a set of 8 reps really heavy to failure on incline press, you rest 15 seconds and try to get it back up, hoist it back to your shoulder, and then press it from a dead stop, whilst pre-exhausted, you're not going to get any reps. It's going to be a waste of time. So there are certain movements that, even if you are doing higher reps, it's not going to be conducive with. So you have to take into account the rep range and the movement at hand. Now, how many rest pauses do we do? Well, again, this depends on the movement. If you're doing a movement where you need more time and attention, you need more muscular damage to really feel it hit, it's a lagging body part, you have poor mind muscle connection, whatever the point might be, you're going to have to do more rest pauses. So let's say you're doing pull-ups and you have a lagging back and you have a lagging mind muscle connection to your lats, you might need to do 3 or 4 rest pauses to really hit that muscle correctly. Very similar to my drop set video previously, where the amount of drop sets you do varies relative to the body part. There is a pattern here. Whereas if you're doing, again, bicep curls where you have high pain receptors, you have high proprioception in this muscle, you have better mind muscle connection, you can feel it working better, you might only need 1, maybe 2 rest pauses to get the job done. So very similar to the drop set principles where it just depends on the muscle at hand. How many drop sets, how many rest pauses you do is going to depend on the muscle and the movement. It also will depend on how many reps you're getting. If you say do a set of 10 pull-ups, rest 20 seconds, do another set and you get 4 reps, and then you rest another 20 seconds and you go for another set and you only get 2 reps, well, there's a good chance you don't need to do another rest pause because you probably won't get a single rep, or you might only get 1 rep. So if you're starting to really lose reps, well, it might be time to just now move on. Now, it should be glaringly obvious and it should be common sense that rest pauses should be done to failure. But I have seen people who do volume workouts with reps in reserve who do rest pauses. This doesn't make any fucking sense. First of all, you shouldn't be doing reps in reserve. You should only be doing reps in reserve if you're doing high volume powerlifting program where you're trying to get neurological adaptation. If you're trying to just get generally strong and get generally big, you should be training to failure to hit the adaptation required to grow. So if you're not already hitting failure, there is no reason to then do a rest pause, which is a high intensity protocol to go beyond failure if you're not hitting failure already. That is fucking retarded. Now, the reason we do rest pauses is like any other high intensity beyond failure tip or trick, like a drop set or a force rep. It is simply to increase time on attention. Volume. Volume is simply time on attention. Sometimes certain movements need more time on attention. If you're only doing 8 reps, you're not getting that much time and attention on the given exercise. So you might need to do a few reps beyond failure, whether it be a rest pause, drop set, or force rep to get more volume, time, and attention. So that's the real reason we do it, is to get more reps than the initial set to failure. So now you might be thinking, well, when do I implement rest pauses? I've got these drop sets, I've got these force reps, of which I'll be doing a force rep video in the future as the holy trinity for high intensity beyond failure work. But for today, rest pauses. So how do we implement rest pauses when we're already doing drop sets? Well, there are certain movements where rest pauses are superior. So for example, let's say you're doing a barbell bench press and you don't have a workout partner to help you take the plates off for a drop set. So realistically, you'd be spending 20 to 30 seconds doing this drop set when really you should have just taken that 20 to 30 seconds to rest and then do a rest pause. Or maybe you're doing a plate loaded machine where it's difficult to get out of the machine, or it's going to take you a lot of time to change the plates on and off. Maybe you just don't want to use a bunch of little plates. Maybe you just want to use the big plates. In this case, rest pauses would be a superior variation of high intensity beyond failure work. Or maybe it could just be that you prefer rest pauses over drop sets. They are more simple. They apply to the keep it stupid simple principle. A lot of people that do high intensity are doing high intensity because it is simple. It's not overcomplicated with all these extra volume workout bullshit like concurrent, undulation, speed days, all these different principles that go into volume days. You lose all that when you do high intensity, which gives you a clear vision of what you're doing. And sometimes you don't want to do drop sets because that's the reason you started doing high intensity in the first place, was to simplify it. So in this case, you might just find that you prefer drop sets. And that's really it. Rest pauses are very simple. So if you're not implementing them into your program yet, maybe give them a go. You might prefer them over drop sets. You might prefer them over drop sets or force reps in certain movements. Maybe you don't like them at all. But they are a very handy tool if you do enjoy them, and they most definitely will give you excellent gains as you'll be going beyond failure on the movements that require it. And until next time, like, subscribe, all that good shit. See you cunts later.